Steve Dotto here, and today I am going to take on, I think, the most daunting social media explanation task there is. What is Twitter going to do for me? People ask me that all the time. It's one of the most difficult questions to answer. What is Twitter? Twitter is just a tool. Twitter is a communication tool that allows us to take short little snapshots of information, 140 characters, and publish it. And people can subscribe to our stream. They can subscribe so that they can see it, what it is we're saying with our 140 characters, and we can subscribe to other people's 140 character stream. Now, what's said in those streams can be anything from business to personal information to opinion to humor to sports to entertainment. It can be almost anything that we're interested in talking about. So it's an online conversation that's dynamic, going back and forth. There's some rules of engagement, but different people are going to use it in vastly different ways. For most of us, though, it's going to break down into one of two different areas in our life. Either it's going to fall in our business area, which most of us should be concerned about. We have to evaluate if Twitter is a tool that we should be looking at for business, or it's going to be a personal area where we're going to be using it for entertainment, maybe for communicating with our friends, maybe staying up to date with our friends. But that's a much softer decision. That's something that can wait. It's not as important. I think if we learn and figure out where Twitter fits in business first, we can then decide whether or not it's going to fit and it's a tool that we want to use in our personal life. And of course, in this world, our personal lives and our business lives tend to blend into each other. But for the most part right now, I'm going to talk about Twitter for business, how it kind of fits in the business world, because I think that's a more important conversation. So basically, people are going to use Twitter in business to either increase their brand, be that their business brand, be that their personal brand, create an additional profile for themselves by being out on Twitter, putting forward their opinion and gaining a lot of followers. There's a lot of equity in having a lot of people following you. That gives you some status on the internet. You become a more important person the more people that follow you, or at least a perceived more important person the more people that follow you. With a lot of people listening to you, with reaching out and communicating with them, that creates tremendous opportunity for them to listen to your message, to buy whatever it is that you might ultimately be selling. That's, for most people, the most important facet of Twitter. Secondary, but equally valuable, is the idea of using Twitter to stay abreast, to use it as a communication tool to teach you what's happening, whether it's trends, whether it's what your competitors are doing, whether it's what your customers are doing or thinking. It allows you to stay on top of that world. So if one of those two main criteria appeal to you, stick around and I'll show you some of the basics about just setting up your Twitter account from the beginning. If you haven't already signed up for your Twitter account, you need to do that before we move ahead. One thing I want you to think about is your username as you go through. The rest of the Twitter sign up is pretty straightforward. You're going to be given your email address. It is, of course, free, so don't worry about that. Choosing a password. And you can sign up from mobile phone or from your iPad or other mobility device, but I think it's better to start on the computer. But it is important to think about your username, because your username is what people are going to be identifying your Twitter feed with for all time. So picking a good username right at the beginning, very important. And don't be too frustrated. I mean, there's going to be names that you're going to choose that are going to have already been taken, because there's already millions and millions of people on Twitter. So if you tried to get my name, I type in dottotech, I hit enter, and it says, oh, sorry, this username is already taken. You're going to have to come up with another one. They'll give you their normal suggestions, but you're going to have to come up with a good name. It will be identified, as I said, with your Twitter account for all time. People will use an @ symbol or a hashtag along with your username to identify you in different ways within posts. And there are tools within Twitter that will automatically identify whenever anybody uses your username and refers to you to let you know how the conversation is going on around you and about you online. That's one of the beauties of Twitter. Is it gives us instant feedback to every comment that we should be paying attention to. And a lot of that leverages off your username. Once you have created your Twitter account, you're going to be faced with probably the most daunting task in Twitter. And I think the place that most people fall off the bandwagon. Statistics show that only about 40% of people who sign up for the Twitter account stay on it after 4 or 5 weeks. And the reason is, or stay active on it after 4 or 5 weeks. And the reason is they don't find value right away. They don't find things that engage them, and they don't find a place that it really speaks to them. So you're not going to have anybody that you're following. You're going to have your name up there. You can go through and into the settings. You've chosen a picture for yourself. You've put a picture up and it looks kind of lonely. And it's also a little bit intimidating because you feel like you're stepping into a place that you don't really understand and you're afraid you're going to embarrass yourself. Well, I don't know how to really alleviate those fears, help you to alleviate those fears, but don't worry about it. You're probably not going to embarrass yourself. Certainly not at the beginning because there's nobody following you at the beginning, so it's going to be very difficult to make very many bad mistakes. So the place to start and the thing to build with is to start following your friends, people that you want to, or people that you're going to be interested in what they have to say. So starting to create and follow people for a little while before you start tweeting, before you start getting too active in adding your voice to the Twitter conversation. Now, how do you find people? How do you sign them up? Well, Twitter's going to, based on the people that you do sign up and what you list as your interest and that sort of stuff, they're going to start to offer you some suggestions of people that you could be following. And you can just, if any of these, if you're interested in any of the topics that they're offering to you, you can just click on the link with the individual's name, with their name, and you'll get a little description of what they're all about, how many people are following them, and how many people they're following, and you'll see the sample of their last tweets, and you can determine if you want to follow any of these posters at this particular point. You can just click here on follow, see that little button right there, and that will allow you to start following that person. If there are sites that you regularly visit, you typically will find somewhere on that site a button that will allow you to get to their Twitter feed right away to follow them. And that's a great way to start things. If you happen to tune into our show all the time and follow what I'm doing, right here, look, right at the very top of my page is follow at dottotech. Now, I don't tweet an awful lot. I tend to tweet out. I tend to not to be too conversational, but instead to be more informational about what's happening with the show and when we have new videos out, or who our guests are, or when we have contests. So I don't do an awful lot of tweeting, but if you wanted to follow me, all you do is you would click there. That'll bring up my profile, and there'll be a little follow me. Sorry, I don't have that because it is me. There'll be a follow button. So you can do that by visiting anybody's website. You're typically going to find a link there that will allow you to follow that individual. That's a great way to start to build up your roster of people that you follow. Also, just talking to your friends. There are tools within Twitter that will prompt you saying, do you want to import your Facebook list, your Google list, your list of email addresses, and do you want us to look for people who are on Twitter based on those addresses? You can choose to do that if you want. If you want to follow everybody that you know, you can choose to, or you can be a little bit more targeted in who and what you're going to follow. After you follow people for a couple of weeks, you'll start to get the idea of the sorts of conversation that goes on, and then you can decide if you want to start tweeting yourself. And what you can do is when you start to follow somebody, they're almost always notified that you are following that. Somebody new is following them, and I take a look at everybody who follows me, and if they happen to be somebody that has something that they're saying that I find interesting, if they're into educational technology, for example, and I say I'm always looking for good information in that area, I can choose to reciprocally follow them at that point too. So you will find, as you start to add people and start following people, that even if you're not saying anything, people will start to follow you, and you'll start to build up a little bit of a following at that point there. And that'll give you an opportunity to start to test and to see what happens as you do your first tweets. It's not that difficult a process. With 140 characters, you'll find that sometimes it's more challenging to determine exactly what you want to say and how to say it within that limitation. And as you start to fold your Twitter account into other areas of your life, as you add it to your mobile phone, and it's really ideal for mobile phone because that short little text string, as you start to do it, you'll find that you start to discover little bits of value. All of a sudden, Twitter opens your eyes to something that you didn't know about before, or it gives you an opportunity that you wouldn't have known about elsewise. And that's when the hook is in, and that's when you start to really see the value in Twitter. If you've gone with it for 6 weeks, you've been playing with it, you've been using it, you've been trying, and you don't see value, well, then maybe it's not for you. And there's no indictment at that point. You don't have to become a Twitter follower. But I think certainly everybody in business, it's something they should explore, something they should understand, something they should have knowledge of where it sits, even if it doesn't speak to them, even if there's no value for them. And chances are, though, if you do test it out, it'll probably end up finding a home in your communication toolkit somewhere.